Last month, I attended the funeral of a client I'd been caring for. His name was David. I'll use a different name to protect his privacy. And he was 78 years old when he passed. 78. I sat in that church watching his family grieve, and all I could think about were the other clients I'm caring for right now who are in their early 90s, still independent, still driving themselves to appointments, still tending their gardens. His daughter kept asking me the same question over and over, why him? Why so young? He seemed fine. And here's the truth I had to tell her, as gently as I could. He wasn't fine. I had seen the signs. For almost a year, I'd watched 4 patterns show up in David, patterns I've learned to recognize after 20 years of doing this work. Patterns that, if we'd caught them earlier, if we'd understood what they meant, might have given us more time with him. I've cared for hundreds of seniors over 2 decades. I started when I was 18, caring for my own grandmother. What began as family duty became my life's work, and in all that time, I've seen the full spectrum of aging. I've cared for people who were sharp and independent at 93. I've also watched people decline rapidly at 76. The difference isn't always genetics. It's not always luck. There are patterns that show up again and again in the seniors who struggle past 80. And here's what breaks my heart. Most of these patterns are things we could address if we recognize them early enough. That's why I'm making this video. I'm tired of sitting with families after it's too late, hearing them say, I wish someone had warned us. I wish we'd known what to look for. I've heard those words too many times, so I'm telling you now, while there's still time, not to frighten you, not to be morbid, but because I believe awareness gives us choices, and choices give us time. If you've noticed changes in yourself, if you're getting tired more easily, if things feel different in ways you can't quite name, I want you to know something. You're not imagining it. In my 20 years of caregiving, I've learned that seniors often notice things about themselves long before anyone else does. That awareness you have, that concern you feel, it's not paranoia, it's wisdom. Your body is trying to tell you something, and it deserves to be taken seriously. And if you're watching this for a parent or a loved one, if you've started noticing things during your visits, dad seems quieter, mom's moving slower, they're not laughing as much as they used to, I see you too. That worry you're carrying, wondering if you're overreacting, wondering if this is just normal aging, it's worth paying attention to. You can't be there every day, but you can learn what to look for. You can understand the patterns that matter. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to share the 4 patterns I saw in David, the same patterns I've observed in dozens of other seniors who declined faster than their families expected. But I'm also going to share what I've seen work, because I've watched people turn these patterns around in their late 70s and early 80s. I've seen recovery happen when I thought it was too late. The body wants to heal. The spirit wants purpose. But we have to recognize what's happening while there's still time to make different choices. This isn't easy to talk about, but silence has consequences. And I've witnessed too many of those consequences to stay quiet anymore. The first pattern I need to tell you about is one that most families don't recognize as dangerous until it's too late. It's the loss of purpose. And I know that might sound vague or emotional, but stay with me. Because what I've witnessed over 20 years is that when someone loses their reason to get out of bed, their body responds as if it's been given permission to shut down. I cared for a man I'll call Robert. I use a different name to protect his privacy. He was 73 when I started working with him, and he'd retired about 2 years before that. For his whole adult life, Robert had been an engineer. He loved solving problems. He'd go into the office every day with his thermos of coffee, stay late working on projects, mentor the younger engineers. His identity was wrapped up in that work. And then one day, he retired. His wife had been asking him to for years. His children said it was time, so he did. When I met Robert, 18 months after his retirement, he was still physically healthy. No major diagnoses. But something in him had already started fading. At first, his wife didn't notice. She was just happy to have him home. But I was there 3 mornings a week, and I started seeing a pattern. Robert would sleep later and later. When I'd arrive at 9 in the morning, he'd still be in bed. Not sick, not in pain, just no reason to get up. His breakfast routine got simpler and simpler. Then he started skipping it altogether. And the phrase I heard more and more often, "What's the point? What's the point of getting dressed if I'm just sitting around the house? What's the point of going for a walk if there's nowhere I need to be? What's the point of staying up late if I have nothing to do tomorrow?" Over those 18 months, I watched Robert fade in ways that had nothing to do with physical illness. The decline I was witnessing wasn't medical. It was existential. His body was responding to the message his spirit was sending. There's no reason to keep going. Now, I've seen what triggers this pattern. Sometimes it's retirement, especially if it happens suddenly or without a plan for what comes next. Sometimes it's the loss of a spouse, when the person you've been caring for or living alongside for decades is suddenly gone and you don't know who you are without them. Sometimes it's when adult children move across the country and your role as parent or grandparent shifts. Sometimes it's after an injury or illness that takes away your independence, and suddenly you feel like a burden instead of a contributor. If you've noticed you don't have a reason to get out of bed anymore, I want to say something to you directly. That's not weakness. That's not you giving up. That's your spirit telling you it needs something to care about. Human beings aren't meant to exist without purpose. We're meant to matter. We're meant to contribute. We're meant to feel needed. And when those things disappear, our bodies feel it just as much as our hearts do. If you're watching this for someone you love, these are the signs to watch for. Are they sleeping more than they used to? Have their routines gotten simpler or disappeared? Do they turn down invitations they used to accept? Do you hear phrases like, "I don't matter anymore," or "I'm just in the way," or "What's the point?" Those aren't just sad thoughts, they're warning signs. But here's what I've also learned. The seniors I've cared for who stayed strongest the longest, who lived well into their 90s with their minds sharp and their spirits engaged, they all had something in common. They had purpose. They had reasons to get out of bed. And those reasons didn't have to be grand. I'll tell you more about what I've seen work in just a bit. But I need you to understand the other patterns first, because they all connect. If this is resonating with you, I'd love to know you're here. Comment the number 1 below so I can see this message is reaching the people who need it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I share insights like this every week from my 20 years of working with seniors. Now let me tell you about the second pattern, and this one families miss even more often than the first. The second pattern is social isolation. And I know what you're thinking. Of course, loneliness is bad for people. But what I've learned is that isolation doesn't look the way most families expect it to look. It happens so gradually that by the time anyone notices, the damage is already done. I cared for 2 women at different times in my career. Both were 81. Both were widowed. Both had similar health conditions. A little arthritis, some high blood pressure, nothing unusual for their age. I'll call them Dorothy and Helen to protect their privacy. But the outcomes for these 2 women were completely different. And the difference taught me everything I needed to know about what isolation really does to the body. Dorothy had a best friend who lived 3 blocks away. They talked on the phone every single morning at 8 o'clock. Every Tuesday, Dorothy went to her friend's house for coffee. Every Thursday afternoon, she had a card game with 3 other women from her church. Her daughter lived an hour away and visited twice a month. When I was with Dorothy, she'd tell me stories about her card game, about what her friend said on the phone that morning. She was connected. She had people who expected to hear from her, people who would notice if she didn't show up. Helen's children lived across the country. They called once a week, sometimes twice. They were good children who loved their mother, but they weren't there. Helen didn't have close friends nearby anymore. They'd either moved to be near their own children or had passed away. When I'd arrive at Helen's house, the silence was the first thing I'd notice. No phone ringing, no plans on the calendar, just quiet. Dorothy lived to 94. She stayed in her own home, stayed sharp, stayed engaged with life. Helen declined rapidly and passed away at 83. And I'm telling you, the difference wasn't medical. It was connection. Because here's what I've learned. The body responds to loneliness the same way it responds to physical pain. Isolation triggers stress responses that weaken your immune system, raise your blood pressure, affect your sleep, even impact your memory and thinking. And here's what families miss. Sunday visits seem fine. You show up, mom seems happy to see you, you have a nice conversation, you leave feeling like everything's okay. But I'm there Tuesday morning, Wednesday afternoon, Friday morning. And I see the silence in between. I see what happens when there's no one to talk to, no one expecting you, no reason to leave the house. That isolation compounds every other health issue a person has. If you've noticed you're spending more and more time alone, if the invitations you used to accept have stopped coming, or you've stopped saying yes, if days go by without real conversation, that matters. Your body is keeping score even if you're telling yourself you're fine with being alone. Now let me tell you about the third pattern, because this one is even more critical for staying independent past 80. Muscle loss. I can spot this pattern the moment I walk into someone's home. It's in how you rise from a chair, whether you need to push off with your hands or whether you can stand up smoothly. It's in your grip when you shake my hand. It's in how you walk to the bathroom, steady and confident, or shuffling and uncertain. After caring for hundreds of seniors, I can tell you this. Muscle strength matters more than almost any other single factor for staying independent. Not your blood pressure numbers, not your cholesterol levels, your muscle strength. Because here's what happens. When you can't get out of a chair easily, you start sitting more. When walking feels unsteady, you start moving less. And the less you move, the weaker you get. It's a cycle that accelerates faster than most people realize. But here's the critical part. When you lose muscle strength, you lose your ability to catch yourself when you stumble. And that's when falls happen. And falls after 80, they change everything. A broken hip can mean surgery, hospital stay, rehab facility, and many people never return to the same level of independence they had before. I've watched this cascade happen too many times. One fall becomes the dividing line between living independently and needing full-time care. If you've noticed, it's getting harder to get up from low chairs. If your legs feel weaker going upstairs. If you're holding onto walls or furniture more when you walk, your body is telling you something important. This isn't just aging. This is a pattern you can change. But you have to recognize it's happening, and you have to understand why it matters so much for everything else in your life. Because these patterns, the loss of purpose, the isolation, the muscle loss, they all connect. They all make each other worse. And that brings me to the fourth pattern I need to tell you about. If what I'm sharing is helping you understand what you've been noticing, comment the number 2 below, so I know these insights are reaching you. Now let me tell you about the fourth pattern. And this one might be the most dangerous because it feels like you're doing everything right. The fourth pattern is one I see constantly, and it might be the most dangerous because people think they're doing everything right. It's the belief that medication alone is enough, that as long as you're taking your pills, you're taking care of yourself. I cared for a man I'll call James. I use a different name to protect his privacy. He was 84, had type 2 diabetes, and was very proud of the fact that he took his medication every single day without fail, never missed a dose. His blood sugar numbers were decent. His doctor was reasonably satisfied, and James thought that meant he could eat whatever he wanted. Ice cream after dinner most nights, white bread with every meal, skipping vegetables because, in his words, I'm taking my medicine, so it doesn't matter. I was there the day his daughter found him unconscious on his kitchen floor. His blood sugar had dropped dangerously low, then spiked dangerously high. He survived. He recovered. But it was a wake-up call that came way too close to being the final call. And the hardest part? James genuinely believed he was doing everything right because he was taking his medication. Here's what I need you to understand. Medication manages conditions. It doesn't cure them. It doesn't replace the fundamentals your body needs. I've watched people decline despite perfect medication compliance because they thought the pills were doing all the work. But medication for diabetes doesn't replace the need to eat well and move your body. Blood pressure medication doesn't replace the need to manage stress and stay active. Heart medication doesn't replace the need for connection and purpose. Your medication is a tool. It's an important tool. But it works with your lifestyle choices, not instead of them. And when you believe the prescription is enough, you stop doing the things that actually keep you healthy and independent. But now, let me tell you what I've also seen. Because after sharing these 4 patterns with you, loss of purpose, isolation, muscle loss, and over-reliance on medication, I need you to know that I've watched people turn every single one of these patterns around, even in their late 70s and early 80s, even when I thought it might be too late. I told you about Margaret earlier, the woman who lived to 96, sharp and independent until the end. When I started caring for her, she was 89. And the thing about Margaret was that she never stopped moving. Every single morning, she walked. Not far, not fast, just a 20-minute walk around her neighborhood, rain or shine. She'd say, "My body wants to keep going, so I have to keep moving." She understood something that took me years to learn. Movement isn't optional after 80, it's medicine. I cared for a man who was 76 when he started doing simple strength exercises with light weights, just twice a week, nothing intense. And over 6 months, I watched him rebuild muscle I honestly thought was gone forever. He went from needing help getting out of his chair to standing up easily, from shuffling to walking with confidence. His daughter cried the first time she saw him climb the stairs without holding the railing. She said, "I thought we were just watching him get weaker." But we weren't, because he gave his body the chance to get stronger. And Dorothy, the woman I told you about who had her friend and her card game, she's still here, still connected, still engaged with life, because she understood that people aren't a luxury. Connection isn't something you do when you have time. It's as essential as any medication you take. So here's what I'm asking you to do. If you've lost your sense of purpose, find one thing, one small thing that gives you a reason to get out of bed. It could be calling a friend every morning. It could be tending a small garden. It could be volunteering once a week. It doesn't have to be grand. It just has to matter to you. If you're isolated, reach out to one person, one phone call, one coffee date, one reconnection with someone you've been meaning to call. Your body is keeping score of your loneliness. Give it connection instead. If you've noticed muscle weakness, move your body. Even small movements count. Stand up and sit down from a chair 10 times. Walk to the mailbox. Do simple exercises while you watch television. The body wants to heal. It wants to rebuild, but you have to give it the chance. And if you're taking medication, keep taking it. But understand it's working with your lifestyle, not replacing it. Talk to your doctor about what else you can do, what you can change, how you can support what the medication is trying to do. I've watched people turn these patterns around in their late 70s and early 80s. The body wants to heal. The spirit wants purpose. But you have to recognize what's happening while there's still time to make different choices. And that time, it's now. I want to tell you why I make these videos. It's not for recognition. It's not because I think I have all the answers. It's because I've held too many hands at the end. I've sat with too many families in those final days and heard the same words over and over. I wish we'd known. I wish someone had told us what to watch for. I wish we'd had more time. In my 20 years of doing this work, I've watched both outcomes. I've cared for seniors who thrived well into their 90s, who stayed sharp and engaged and independent until the very end. And I've watched people decline rapidly in their 70s, losing years they could have had. And here's what I've learned. The difference often comes down to awareness, to recognizing patterns while there's still time to make different choices, to understanding that small, consistent actions matter more than we realize. If you're watching this for yourself, if you've noticed changes in your own body or your own life that worry you, I want to say something directly to you. You know your own body better than anyone else does. That intuition you have, that sense that something's different, that's not paranoia. That's wisdom. You've lived in that body for 70, 80, 90 years. You know when things shift. And that awareness you're feeling right now, it's power. It's the first step toward making choices that could change everything. You don't have to accept decline as inevitable. You don't have to watch yourself get weaker or more isolated or less engaged and tell yourself it's just aging. Some of it is aging, yes, but some of it, maybe more than you realize, is patterns you can change. I've watched it happen. I've seen people in their late 70s start moving again, start connecting again, start finding purpose again. And I've watched their bodies and their spirits respond. And if you're watching this for a parent or a loved one, if you're the daughter who visits on Sundays or the son who calls every week, I see you too. I see the guilt you're carrying, the worry that you're not doing enough, not noticing enough, not there enough. And I want to tell you something. The guilt doesn't serve anyone, not you, not the person you love. But your willingness to learn, your willingness to pay attention to patterns, your willingness to have difficult conversations before it's too late, that can change everything. You can't be there every day, I understand that, but you can learn what to look for during the time you do have. You can recognize when purpose is slipping away, when isolation is setting in, when muscle weakness is becoming dangerous, when medication isn't enough on its own, and you can ask questions, you can start conversations. You can encourage small changes before they become necessary interventions. These 4 patterns I've shared with you, loss of purpose, isolation, muscle loss, and the belief that medication is enough, they're not inevitable. They're not just what happens when you get older. They're warning signs, they're opportunities, they're your body and your spirit asking for something different. And you have the awareness now. That's what this conversation has given you. The ability to recognize what's happening before it's too late. I've spent 20 years in this field because I believe something deeply. I believe the later years of life can be some of the most meaningful, some of the fullest, if we approach them with awareness and intention. I've seen it. I've witnessed it in the people I've cared for who made it to their mid-90s still laughing, still engaged, still living lives that mattered to them. And I've also seen what happens when we ignore the patterns, when we stay silent about the difficult truths, when we wait until crisis forces our hand. You have time, not unlimited time. None of us have that. But you have time right now to make different choices, to reach out to that friend you've been meaning to call, to start moving your body again, even in small ways, to find one thing that gives you purpose, to understand that your medication works with your lifestyle, not instead of it, to have the conversation you've been avoiding. The awareness you have now, that's the first step. What you do with that awareness, that's up to you. But I'm here, sharing what I've learned, because I want you to have every possible chance at those meaningful later years. You deserve that. The people who love you deserve that. And it starts with recognizing the patterns while there's still time to change them. Before I let you go, if these insights have helped you understand something you've been noticing, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe. I share what I've learned from 20 years of caregiving every week, and I want to make sure this reaches the people who need it. Take care of yourself, take care of each other, and remember, you're not alone in this. I'll see you in the next one.